Hi, I'm Eric Wilkinson. I'm one of the 4 therapists in the Office of Work Life. And today, this is going to be a presentation on when kids love hard, play, in conflict. So when we think about play, we think about conflict. One of the things that is a front of mind for a lot of parents is aggression and what is developmentally normal, how to respond to aggression, when should there be concerns. But I think there's also really needs to be an equal focus on the importance of play and then ways to respond to conflict, which often arises during play. So the 3 broad areas we're going to look at are physical aggression, social aggression, and then importance of play and movement. And so when we define physical aggression, it includes tantrums, hitting, kicking, shoving, biting, threatening violence. Physical aggression, it can or often does coincide with verbal attacks or verbal aggression. And there are many different sources of physical aggression. Now, let me first just say, developmentally, we know that physical aggression is normal and common, particularly up to the age of 5. But we also see aggression tends to be more of a shift for school age kids. You still have some physical aggression, but you tend to see more social aggression as they become school age and move into adolescence. So there's different factors that at play, but let me just stress that from a normative developmental standpoint, aggression is normal particularly in those first 5 years. And so things that can contribute is basically when there are strong emotions, there's emotion and dysregulation, especially feelings of frustration and anger can lead to aggression. Limited language skills, and that's why particularly children below the age of 7 often don't have the words to express what they're feeling, so they express it through their actions. Poor impulse control can contribute to physical aggression. We're going to talk just briefly about the brain and brain development and how impulse control and aggression are linked. Sometimes physical aggression is a response or a release for physical tension that has built up in the body, or if the child is experiencing sensory overload. And physical aggression can also be originate from a desire to exert control in a situation or control over others. So when you think about the neurobiology underpinnings, it's important just to think about some basic facts about the brain. If we were to put the brain in kind of a broad picture, there's 3 regions that we can kind of focus on. We have the midbrain, and this also includes, of course, the brainstem. This is where what regulates our basic physiological mechanisms, things like breathing, circulating blood, metabolism. We have the limbic system, which is the part of the brain that's associated with our emotions, regulates appetite and sleep. This is where the fight or flight response is based. It can often be irrational and impulsive. So think about the limbic system as kind of an evolved part of our brain, but it's largely where our emotions are based. And like I said, also our sleep and sex drive is based in the limbic system, and the fight or flight response. And then the last part of the brain to develop in children as they move from children to adults is the prefrontal cortex. And this is where we have analytical thinking. This is where language arises, the use and application of logic, decision-making based on reasoning, reflection. The prefrontal cortex, it is really where we are able to exercise impulse control, self-control. And just from a visual standpoint, I'm going to take off the stop share momentarily. Sometimes you guys may have seen this before. You can conceptualize the brain with what I would call the brain fist. So if you make a fist like this, and you think about this part being the brain stem, where you have like the physiological mechanisms in your body regulated by the brain stem. And then in here, you have that emotional part of our brain where our fight or flight response is housed, the limbic system. And then when we make a brain fist, this part up here being the prefrontal cortex, where language is based and where our analytical capacity arises. Oh, you guys can't see me? Let's see. Let's see if I thought I had taken off share screen. So let me come back. Oh, thank you, Adhd. It's hard to see the the brain fist when my video is not on. So my apologies. Well, let me run through that one more time real quick. So now people can see me. So if you make a fist like this part right here would be your brain stem, where your physiological mechanisms are regulated, things like your heartbeat, your breathing. Underneath here in this part of your brain is the limbic system, where emotions are housed. And then this part up here is the prefrontal cortex, where language, logic, impulse control exists. So now let me come back to my PowerPoint. All right. And so in thinking about this, we know right offhand that there certainly are developmental stages where there's much higher risk for aggression. Actually, let me go back to this brain development. We are born with natural, emotions are present from the very beginning, right? When we come into this world. And so we experience care and warmth and love, and we also experience threat and fear and anxiety and danger. And so these emotions are here, but our capacity to use language, this is part of development, being able to put into words what our experience is and to reflect on. So it makes sense that, particularly under the age of 7, when there's, not full language development, particularly with toddlers and the really young ones, there's just not the words. And so when there is a feeling of frustration or anger or feelings of threat, that these often get expressed behaviorally as opposed to use of language. It also makes sense if we think about from a diagnostic standpoint where there's risk for aggression. ADHD, there's risk because you have limited impulse control. Again, impulse control is kind of emanates from our prefrontal cortex, our ability to stop and think and use language and use logic to, look into the future, to problem solve. We know that when, going back to that brain fist that I was showing, when the prefrontal cortex gets activated, it actually calms down activity in the limbic system where the emotions are based. But the opposite is true. The limbic system, when it's really highly active, then it can overwhelm kind of the thinking part of our brain. So you can almost think about like the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex like a seesaw, or another way to think about it would be like a light switch. If emotions get really high, then the thinking part of our brain often can shut down completely, or it can decrease in abilities. But the opposite is true. Once you start to tap into language and problem solving, that can help to calm down the emotional part of our brain in the limbic system. So ADHD presents elevated risk for aggression just because there's less impulse control, less ability that when strong emotions arise to be able to go and access logic, language, and problem solving. With anxiety, there's increased risk of aggression because, again, anxiety is a strong mood state housed in the limbic system, We know that when people are really anxious, it's difficult, and it becomes more difficult to apply logic, to access or store new memories. That the extreme form of this, of course, is the fight or flight mode, when people are very emotionally reactive and they're just trying to protect themselves. But this can also often result in what appears to be irrational behavior, because it's just basically responding to the desire for safety, responding to a perceived threat in the environment. So anxiety is kind of like the limbic system is always more active, in that, again, impacts impulse control and problem solving and thinking. Learning disabilities can result in aggressive outbursts for the same reasons, that it's more difficult to solve problems or to give words to one's experience. And then children on the autism spectrum, and we know that autism is characterized by a delay in language. And then in addition to that, there's high comorbidity of sensory issues for children on the autism spectrum. So there's a lot of children can get overwhelmed by sensory stimuli in their environment, and then this can then result in aggressive outbursts. So what are some kind of basic principles on how to respond when you see physical aggression? One thing as a parent, regardless of the age of your child, is to try to regulate your own emotion, to maintain calm. This can be done by taking a couple breaths, kind of settling into your body, instead of immediately just trying to jump in. If there's immediate danger, of course we need to take quick action. But a lot of times when we see some physical aggression, it's already happened, or it's kind of simmering, we may see some escalation in terms of like verbalizations. So just that little bit of time, if you can take that 1 or 2 seconds just to kind of center yourself and calm yourself and be present and just, okay, what's going on here? And when you ask that question, what's going on here? Or what's happening? Right in that very moment, you are accessing your prefrontal cortex, which helps you stay calm. So when you can create a calm response, this actually helps children to kind of calm themselves, their own nervous systems down. If you respond by yelling or, with really strong emotion, that is usually fuel on the fire. It usually amps up or has the potential to increase the dysregulation and the aggression. It's important not to give into tantrums or aggressive behavior, because this reinforces it in the child. And so I have been in situations in working with children and where I've taken a child that's, somewhere in that 4 to 7 range that has trouble with emotional regulation. We used to sometimes take them out into public settings to practice social skills. One of the things that would always be difficult for a child of that age would be to go, as I think most parents experience at some point or another, go into the toy section. And it would be difficult both because the child would want to buy toys or ask for a toy, or because they weren't ready to leave when it's time to leave. I can remember having a child, working with a child who became very dysregulated, wanted me to buy something, and I reiterated, well, the rules. We don't buy things when we go on outings. And he proceeded to tantrum for about 25 minutes, where he just kind of was on the ground yelling, often yelling and then crying, kind of back and forth between yelling and crying. In that moment, I just sat down with him. I just expressed empathy. I can see you're really upset. But ultimately, I did not try to become physically aggressive with him. That would have escalated the situation. I didn't yell at him. I knew that really the best thing I could do to help him regulate his emotions was to share empathy and to create calm. even knowing that, I had Walmart, staff walking over and, saying, is everything okay over here? And I just say, yeah, we're good. Everything's fine. But that calm presence, and then not giving into the tantrum, because it would have been very easy for me just to say, okay, I'll buy you the $2 toy and let's go. But in doing that, I would have reinforced that behavior. It's very, one of the best things that you have in your toolbox is catching your child behaving good. So when you see them sharing toys, or you see them using their words, or you see them, following rules, being really specific. I really like how you're sitting in your chair, eating your food. Or I really like how you're playing with your toys gently. I really like how you're using good hands with the cat. Giving that specific label praise, catching them when they're being good. Positive reinforcement is way more effective of long-term than imposing consequences. Now, put in parentheses, parent-child interaction therapy. It's a really nice modality where you essentially let your child lead. There's different components to this, but part of it is that you let your child set aside special playtime where your child takes the lead in play, and you're just really attuned to the child and present with the child. But during that special playtime, there's a couple of things that are kind of the way it's structured. One is that you review the rules, that if the child plays rough with the toys, or throws the toys, or does something that could hurt himself or herself or somebody else, that then we'll have to put the toys up and special playtime is over. So first of all, there's an expectation about, we're not going to engage in physical aggression. But there's also this real strong emphasis on following them as they play and really giving them praise, about just narrating that, I like how you're putting that block on top of the other block. I like how you're, really working hard on figuring out how to get that piece of the puzzle in. When you stay with them and you kind of narrate what they're doing and you give them praise, you are really reinforcing this non-aggressive approach to play that's going to benefit them, but then even later when they become school age, engage in play. Another important response is helping your kids learning to express themselves by naming emotions. So when they're really young, as I mentioned earlier, they have an undeveloped prefrontal cortex. So you often have to be their prefrontal cortex. And so when you see your child getting frustrated, particularly with toddlers or young children, oh, what's going on here? You look really frustrated. Do you need some help? And so you name the emotion. And as much of that as you can do that, like, oh, are you really excited? You look so happy. Kind of narrating and naming their emotions. The more they hear those emotions named, the greater the capacity to internalize language and to be able to use language to express their emotions. So it starts young. It's really important in those first 7 years to try to help your child identify emotion. As they get a little bit older, you can say, what are you feeling right now? Are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling scared? What's going on here? Point number 5 is just paying attention to your child's patterns and identifying what their triggers are. So if you know that certain things result in aggression, then proactively working in ways to try to structure routines, or to build in calm down time, or to build in transition time. A lot of the kids that I've worked with over the years do struggle with emotional regulation and struggle with physical aggression. One of the things that can be very difficult is transitioning from something they enjoy doing to something they don't enjoy doing. And so even by saying, okay, we're going to be leaving in 10 minutes here, and then maybe giving them a 5-minute update so that you can help them to start preparing emotionally and cognitively for that change. You can also set goals, but the goals need to be, realistic, first of all, something that you feel like there's above average chance, a good chance that they can actually meet the goal. And they need to be, you don't want to say, oh, if you go, the whole month without having any kind of aggression before school, then I'll take you to Chuck E. Cheese. And the goals need to be limited in time. I really like goals that, same day goals and rewards. But if not same day, then like this example that's provided where you're looking at their behavior over the course of a short period of time, like a week. When they meet their goals, I emphasize rewarding them with extra time with you, doing a fun activity, going to the park, picking out a movie for family movie night, playing a game together, getting to choose what the family has for dinner. Those type of rewards, I strongly recommend you pursue those kind of bonding relationship type of rewards over giving them, a toy or giving them some kind of financial reward. And then finally, number 6, I jumped ahead. That's what we were talking about, is what I was just talking about, finding appropriate rewards. So when you think about this, when there is physical aggression, maintain calm, don't give into tantrums, be proactive and catch your child when they're acting good and reinforce that with labeled praise. When they're feeling frustration or difficult emotions, help them to name that. When you can identify triggers, proactively look for ways to structure routine that can be helpful to them. And often, again, routine could just be providing some transition time between activities. And then finally, try to use rewards that are relationship based. So that for this PowerPoint, that kind of concludes my focus on the physical aggression. I want to shift here to social aggression. Social aggression consists of actions directed towards damaging others' friendships, self-esteem, or social status. And so examples include shunning, spreading rumors or lies, gossip, nonverbal communication, facial expression, rejecting facial expressions or gestures, or judgmental facial expressions or gestures, showing contempt or disregard. So when we think about school-age kids, we see this, start to emerge often in place of physical aggression, where it will be through making up stories or making fun of somebody, gossiping about them, making faces, excluding them from activities. This type of social aggression, and often meets needs of belonging, wanting to feel like you're on the in group and not the out group. Social aggression can also arise just because there's unresolved conflict between some kids. And so without having either the skill set to kind of come to a common understanding, or without having an adult there to support them, if a conflict remains unresolved, then you often see this social aggression that's directed towards the person the child's in conflict with. Feelings of insecurity and the need to feel included or be liked can lead to social aggression. Particularly for like adolescents, there's a lot of identity formation at play. And so there's a lot of comparing themselves to others. And, unfortunately, sometimes kids will put down others to try to elevate their own sense of importance or power. And so there is a link here to trying to either establish social hierarchies or decline social hierarchies. I will give my own example from adolescence. I remember when there was a class bully in 8th grade, and he would often belittle and make fun of people, but he still maintained a pretty high position within the social hierarchy. And I remember writing essentially like a poem type rap that basically was to take down the bully. And within my own hierarchy, while this may not have been the most social conscious or compassionate way of responding to this bully, by the fact that I took the bully on and wrote this really kind of funny poem, it immediately elevated me within the hierarchy. So I went from just kind of an introverted, shy kid to all of a sudden, I was a popular kid. And so there's a lot of those dynamics at play of trying to either sustain or maintain or climb social hierarchies that play out through social aggression. And again, developmentally, we would expect this. What we want to do is try to help children to take the perspective of others and learn to become more inclusive and not so exclusionary in their behavior. So here are some responses. When you do see social aggression, first of all, be a good listener. In other words, ask the kids what's going on. Tell me about what's going on. Really be curious about how they viewed the conflict, what their experience was, whether they were a witness to the conflict, or they were the aggressor, or they were on the receiving end. Be a good listener and kind of try to see things through this experience of the child or the children if you're with multiple children. Encourage the child to take the perspective of others. This is one of the most important things we learn as human beings, is to learn to empathize with others, to take the perspective of others. This happens, throughout childhood, particularly from, like age 5 on is really important, but even before 5, there's some capacity for taking the perspective of others. Model to your children the importance of inclusiveness, that people are different and that differences in others, is a good thing. It's something we should value and cherish, that it's okay to be different, that it's unkind to treat somebody, to exclude somebody because of their differences. So really to model acceptance of differences, but I would say even an appreciation and valuing differences. And then modeling accountability, so that when we make decisions or act in ways that are hurtful to others, that we recognize that and we are accountable, either by offering an apology or looking for ways to repair the relationship. It's important when there's social aggression. This could be an indication that there's some kind of mood problems going on with the child. We already talked about anxiety and how elevated anxiety can lead to physical aggression. We do know that like mood disorders often can result in social aggression towards others. Teaching your child to recognize what's controllable and what isn't. So sometimes children will feel like a loss of control, or they'll feel vulnerable or insecure, in that their social aggression is trying to make them feel more in control or more secure in their social standing. So letting them practice identifying what's controllable and letting go of what's not controllable. Letting them practice that I can't control the actions of others. I can only be in charge of myself. Advising your child, but not always trying to fix them. A lot of times children learn best when we just facilitate dialogue or exploration, as opposed to telling them what's the right thing to do. You can encourage children to journal, which allows them to do some of this self-reflection and exploration. Teaching them to stand up for themselves. I mean, I can think even back to I love when my niece was 3, I believe, either 2 or 3, in daycare, and there was a child that within her daycare that was biting her and other children, and they taught her, as well as the other kids in the daycare, to say, "Stop! I don't like that." And so that's a really early lesson in teaching like a 2 or 3-year-old. I think she was 3, to stand up for herself. But this becomes an ongoing lesson, the being able to say, hey, you need to stop that. This is not okay. I don't like that. That can be said even when you're, 40 years old. So this is an important skill to both model and support. And then also helping them identify healthy coping skills. So if you recognize that a lot of times social aggression arises when the child is feeling anxious or stressed, or feeling insecure, didn't get enough sleep, working with them to identify things they can do when they feel stressed, things they can do when they're feeling worried or anxious, things they can do when they feel like they don't belong. Helping them develop those different coping skills, so that when those emotions arise, that they can access healthy coping skills and not respond with social aggression. Okay, let me take a quick drink of my beet juice here. Let me shift to play and conflict. what is the purpose of play? And anyone who's willing to venture a guess at this, if you can use the chat box and just type into the chat box what you think is the purpose of play when it comes to kids. And I'll give you guys about just like 30 seconds if anybody wants to be brave and express what's the purpose of play. All right, let's see here. We have learning. We have connecting with others, to learn and express creativity, the work of childhood, I love that, build social skills. Absolutely, it is all of these things, right? Bonding and practicing different skills, experimenting. These are great answers. Yeah, play is about learning social skills, connecting with others, exploring yourself, exploring experience, developing new skills, experimenting with different ways of being, tapping into different types of emotions, making sense of the world, learning to cooperate. It serves all these purposes. And if we think about it, one of the concerns about, from a social standpoint, the loss of unstructured play specifically, from a psychology standpoint, unstructured play is really great for developing problem-solving skills and creativity, learning to take the perspective of others. I mean, when you play, you're often in this role of using your imagination and taking the perspective of others. So unstructured play develops a lot of, kind of critical thinking skills, creativity, problem-solving skills, exploring a range of emotion. And as children's lives become highly structured, like organized, where they have school and then their afternoons and evenings are structured, even if it's structured with positive activities like sports and clubs and working on homework. If there's not opportunities for unstructured play, you lose a lot of this kind of development that is needed for creativity, for resiliency, for imaginative thinking. And so, I do encourage parents to really try to create opportunities for both structured and unstructured play. Often play can result in conflict. And so if we think about conflict, again, I'm going to open it up here. What are some of the conflicts that you guys see in the play that arise within the play with your own kids, or that you witness in the play of other children? What are typical conflicts that arise? And you can put some responses in the chat box. So we have winners and losers. Yeah, right. Learning to be a good sport. Everything's a competition. Taking turns, learning to share, competition for attention. Absolutely. I just have my 8-year-old nephew and niece over, and they're twins, and like back and forth. They're like, look at me do this with the hula hoop. Look at me do this with the scooter. Look at me do this with the ball. And it was just like relentless, that competition for attention. Aggressive play, sharing toys can emerge, can create conflict. Aggressive play can create it. Toys that belong to the older sibling. Yeah, what are you doing with my toy? Wanting to control or be bossy. We see a lot of that. No, we're going to need to play this way. Difficulty with compromising. Right, these are all things that emerge. And this is why play is so important, is because learning to compromise, learning to take the perspective of others, learning to share, learning to be patient, it is hard work. And that is the work of play. So when we think about it, I love the idea, particularly with really young children, of trying to be active in your child's play, modeling the behaviors. And then when conflict arises, kind of taking on that role of the prefrontal cortex, taking on the thinking part of their brain. Depending on the age, it may be just that you say, okay, we need to let someone else have a turn, and and that is sufficient. But if they're a little bit older, you can say, oh, I wonder, so and so looks sad because they haven't had a chance to shoot the basketball yet. So, like, particularly with younger children, having adult role models that can engage when needed, particularly during times of conflict. As children get older, helping them to practice, like when something bothers them, to identify their feelings. A lot of times kids just get stuck in arguing over, whether somebody, broke a rule, or whether or not somebody was, committed a foul in basketball, for example. So learning to use I language and say, I'm frustrated right now because you're not listening to me. So you're learning to identify feelings, to use I language, recognizing that when I feel, there are times I need to take a break from play. Maybe I need to get a drink of water or walk away. But I also saw this, particularly in the ages of like elementary school, 8 or 9, there's a lot of interest in play with rules, and there's a lot of games around winners and losers. And these types of games are important because they teach children to accept social norms, and children learn frustration tolerance. But there's also a real importance to create play opportunities where it is collaborative, where we're all on the same team, we're all working towards a similar goal, or play that is more creative in nature. We're just all painting together, doing art together. Imaginative play, where we're using our imagination. When younger children, it can literally be, I'm pretending to be a superhero, and we're playing with each other. For teenagers, imaginative play could be, working on some, I don't know, creating a video together, or it could be, games where you have to, like, some of the games where you have to, like, you get a certain topic and you have to use your imagination to answer the questions. So it's nice to have a balance of play where it's not all one type of play. When you see bossy behavior or controlling behavior, those are all opportunities to kind of to intervene and say, hey, what's going on in here? I wonder, and this is again where you're kind of thinking out loud, I wonder, if let's see, Jessica, I wonder if Jessica would like a turn, being able to decide what characters you're going to be. Trying to find these little moments to create some flexibility in play. So if we think about play and movement, we do know that when there is a lack of either of those things, like physical movement or the opportunities to engage in play, that you're more likely to see tension and frustration build up in a child. You're more likely to see both physical aggression and then potentially social aggression. Another thing to think about is when you are seeing a behavior pattern where the child always needs to win, or is really reluctant to, share toys, let's say, compared to other peers of the same age, you may want to become curious about, I wonder if there's something going on right now where they feel out of control, where they feel loss of control, and that the need to feel in control is manifesting in the play. A lot of times that's where you do see the desire to control play, is because there's other areas in the child's life where they feel lack of control. And then if you recognize that, being able to help them, talk about those things, make meaning out of those things that are bothering them. It may be that you see aggression manifest in play because the child is feeling very angry that their parents are getting a divorce, or that some children are being mean to them in school. And so also trying to, if you see consistent patterns of like either aggressive behavior or controlling behavior in play, to try to reflect on and see, are there things going on in the child's life that could be contributing to this? I'll just, on this particular topic, I'll close with this this thought of, I started working with a child who was 5, whose father had about a year before died by suicide. And when I first worked with that child, he was on the playground, and I was observing him, and all other children would be playing on the on the slide and on swings, And this child just was kind of walking around the outskirts by himself in the grass. And I remember asking his teacher, is this normal for him? And they said, yeah, he won't ever play with the other kids. He just walks around looking at the grass. We don't know what's going on. And so I was just starting to work with him. I just ventured over and I said, hey there, what's going on here? And, just with like 2 minutes of chatting, I realized that he shared with me that he was looking for four-leaf clovers, because that was something he used to do with his dad. And so, by taking that 2 minutes just to become curious, I was able to discover something that his teachers weren't able to make sense of. And it was really that he was dealing with these feelings of grief over the loss of his father. I was also able to, like, in kind of a hands-on way, participate with him, to look with four-leaf clovers with him, but then also say, hey, what do you think about if we go over there and play with some of these other kids, and kind of provide that adult support to bring him in so that he could get some of those social interactions. But, what I had to, it was really important in this example that I first identify and not just try to shut down the behavior. Like, what's going on over here? What are you doing over here? Became curious about it, learned what that behavior was really about, and then acknowledged it, validated it, even engaged in looking with four-leaf clovers before suggesting, hey, what do you think if we go over and play on the slides? Would you like to do that for a while? And letting him kind of move through those emotions at his own pace. So that will be, I think that's my last slide. Let me double check. Again, I am one of the 4 counselors in the Office of Work Life. I think all of us have some experience working with kids. It's an area that I really like, working with kids. So we can work with adults, but we also work with the children of UK faculty and staff. And everybody's entitled to 5 free counseling sessions per fiscal year, which can be used for themselves or their dependents. And so with that, I'll conclude the presentation. And